Hey everyone, I'm Natalie Bencivenga, host of 5 Minutes With, and this week I have the pleasure of interviewing the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh, Bill Peduto, and he is up for re-election and the primary is May 18th, so I am so honored and excited that he was able to make time out of his very hectic schedule to join me. So thank you so much, Bill.
My pleasure. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So I'm just going to dive right in. I have a few questions that I put together, and then I also asked my viewers on Instagram and other social media platforms what they wanted to ask you. So I'll wrap up with a couple of questions from the viewers. So to start, I wanted to ask you, do you think your priorities have shifted since the onset of the pandemic? And if you had to come up with the top 3 priorities moving forward if reelected, what would they be?
Yeah, without a doubt they have. I would say that immediately in 2020, back in January, we started preparing for this. And the concern, and it's still part of that concern, is public health. At the time of the pandemic, we were doing basically scenario planning of what it would look like if 40% of our public safety officials weren't able to come to work, or we had to quarantine a few dozen environmental service workers, and planning out and creating a government that could be mobile. Today, it's a major concern of vaccination. So making sure that our most critical communities are being vaccinated, including our homeless neighbors and our lower income communities and those that are homebound. Creating a system where you don't have to go to the vaccination, but the vaccination can come to you. Fortunately, we have strong partners with 2 health networks, a number of nonprofits, our foundation community, and we're able to pull together in order to be able to do that. But the priorities still remain. The fundamentals of local government are public works and public safety. We're in charge of the building code and the criminal code, and we need to make sure that the city is safe for everyone. And then the other part of it is an understanding that as we're seeing a growing economy, we want to make sure that everyone has a place in it and that nobody is displaced by it. And those priorities remain and continue to remain as our top priorities as well.
Thank you. So second question has to do with the cost of living in the city, and the rising rents have people concerned. And I literally just before doing this interview happened to be online and saw that Public Source just released some information that UPMC is investing into affordable housing at the tune of $40 million, along with other organizations like Highmark Health, CMU, and the University of Pittsburgh. What will this initiative look like? Who's going to be overseeing the tracking of these investments? And what would you say to critics that might say that, charity doesn't take the place of paying their fair share of taxes?
Yeah, well, let's start with the last part first. I heard a lot of people say, just have them pay taxes. Simple. Also completely illegal. In the state of Pennsylvania in the 19th century, the Purely Public Charities Act was passed, which exempts all nonprofits from ever paying any taxes at the local level. So we have no authority in order to be able to just have them pay taxes. What we've relied on over the course of several decades has been something called payments in lieu of taxes, pilots, which are voluntary contributions. The voluntary contributions, since the city began the Act 47 changes 16 years ago, in the past 16 years from all the nonprofits throughout the city, has amounted to 34 million. In the next 5 years, just these 4 institutions are giving 115 million, and the money is going directly into the communities that need it the most. This isn't equality. It's not being spread equally around. It's being spent by equity, meaning it's going where it is needed. So yes, UPMC is committing $40 million over the next 5 years into building out affordable housing, but they're not doing it in a vacuum. They're working with housing agencies and others to be able to make that payment become much greater. And over the next 5 years, we'll see the most historic amount of affordable housing being built in the city's history. Carnegie Mellon is working on programs to help with our children in STEM education, working on other types of programs for our Rec to Tech programs in our neighborhoods to begin to get kids in the city more exposure to technology than their suburban neighbors. University of Pittsburgh, one of their initiatives is focused on the ability to have a more sustainable city. So not just taking care of their campus, but our tree canopy throughout this city and our urban forest. Highmark Health is concentrating on housing and health initiatives, finding where disparity exists between races, gender, and income in the city of Pittsburgh, and using the findings of our gender equity study in order to be able to invest directly to provide less disparity in health throughout the city of Pittsburgh. So when people criticize it, I think they're criticizing more that they don't feel as if they're controlling the money, that the money is being done through a nonprofit that is looking at using this in order to leverage even more money from our corporate community, foundation community, and nonprofits, as well as the other institutions in town. At the end of the day, what we're looking at is the potential of $250 million going directly to make the city of Pittsburgh more equitable. And I think that's a good investment.
So let's switch gears for a little bit. Let's talk about fracking and the environment. So some people say that fracking is a dying industry and that the Biden administration is slowly and gradually going to be moving away from it. Where do you stand on fracking?
Well, there are only two candidates who oppose the petrochemical industry growing in Western Pennsylvania in this race, and that's Mr. Thompson and myself. The other candidates are pro petrochemical industry, and that only non-involves fracking, but the use of gas and cracking it to produce more plastics. There's a stark difference between Mr. Gainey, Mr. Moreno, and myself when it comes to this issue. The history that I have with this industry goes back to 2008 when, as a member of City Council, I cast one of the first votes in the world to ban fracking. Pittsburgh City Council was the first government to take action to ban fracking on Earth. And it has continued in my role as the only executive in the state of Pennsylvania to speak out against the growth of the petrochemical industry along the Ohio Valley. Most recently, I've teamed up with 7 other mayors throughout the Ohio Valley and Northern Appalachia, all the way from Huntington, West Virginia, to Youngstown, Ohio, to Louisville, Kentucky. We've been working together, and we have been listed the expertise of the University of Pittsburgh, the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and Columbia University in creating the Marshall Plan for Middle America, which understands that the transference from a fossil fuel-based economy to a renewable-based economy is more likely to happen in our area than it is to happen on the coasts. That we already have the networks and the infrastructure in place. We have a skilled workforce. They've already built communities for over 100 years. What they need is the investment to now turn the Ohio Valley, instead of the petrochemical valley like some want to do, into the hydrogen valley, and begin to create a new energy system throughout our 4-state region to power this country in the same way that we did a century ago through the use of fossil fuel.
Thank you for that. And now I'd like to switch gears and read with you a few questions from our viewers. So this one's actually a combination of 2 questions, and they came from Heather and Allie, who both live in the city of Pittsburgh. Heather wrote that she'd like to hear your thoughts on what, if any, police reform you should have enacted in the city. And Allie wanted to know, can you share your reasoning behind the increase in the policing budget?
Yeah, so I think you said Heather asked what I have done. or what I intend
What,
to.
if any, police reform do you think should be enacted in the city, especially considering the events of last summer with the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yeah, we have taken a number of initiatives, everything from the uh, policies, procedures, and basic actions of our police officers. So we've banned any chokeholds. We've banned no-knock warrants. We've banned the use of certain types of tactics for civil disobedience. Um, we have policies in place now which limit the use of any tactical type weapons unless it warrants up to a misdemeanor or a felony, but not for a summary offense, uh, nor for some misdemeanors as well. We have a history over the past 8 years of reforming the police bureau from within. I hired the first police chief from outside of the bureau in the history of this city. He was, as he called himself, a wrecking ball chief. And he knew that the changes that would be needed, he would only be able to stick around for 2 to 3 years. We instituted those changes very early on. We worked with the Obama administration in writing the policies for 21st century policing. We were rewarded because of that work as one of the first 4 cities in the country to be able to train our officers in implicit bias. We have worked at that same time on training our officers in an aggressive de-escalation tactics. That has resulted in all of 2020, only 2 times in the city where an officer took out their weapon and fired it. And in both cases, that was after they had been fired at first. And we've worked within the Bureau in order to be able to create entirely new initiatives, mini stations in parts of the city that need them and where the community wants them. We've been able to create a civilian affairs division. We've been able to create more community resource officers in neighborhoods. We've expanded the amount of officers in downtown and created a mini station there. We have created programs where our officers are constantly in the community. And we've upgraded all of the technology within the police bureau, but that costs money. And when people start talking about, well, cut the budget, those would be the first things that would go. Because when somebody picks up a phone and calls 911, they don't want to know that there isn't an officer there because you kept the civilian affairs division, but you don't have officers to respond to crime. They want to know that when you call 911, an officer is going to be there. So those that point to the city's budget and say the police budget has gone up should realize that everything that they want in the reformation of police is accounted for in the dollars that we raised.
Thank you for that. And here's a follow-up question from Danielle, actually switching gears a little bit. We're going to go back to the pandemic. When we're talking about the pandemic and the fear of it, how are you going to help to combat vaccination hesitancy and misinformation?
The best way that I can, which is by being the example. I waited until all of our employees had the benefit to be able to get vaccinated until I received my vaccine. I'll be receiving my second vaccine May 13th. And I have been working with the Penguins and the Pirates and arts and cultural organizations about the idea of increasing seating capacity at events, but doing so by creating a vaccinated zone. So you'll have to show your proof that you have been vaccinated. You'll still have to wear your mask, of course, but you'll be able to sit in certain areas with other people that have been vaccinated. I understand for those that oppose the vaccine, they feel that that is taking away their rights, but in many ways, the people who are vaccinated deserve the right to be safe. So I think that we can create incentives in order to be able to push those that are hesitant into becoming vaccinated. And at the second time, we need to be able to show to people who are scared of what the vaccination could bring, that it is completely safe and it will also benefit you and the people you love by being vaccinated.
Bill, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your candor, and I appreciate you spending just a little bit more than 5 minutes with me.
You're welcome. I hope it wasn't 20 minutes.
It was. You were just perfect. Thank you.